there, my YouTube gang, and welcome to the Great Fossil Challenge brought to you by Epicurus 420 and Johnnyversity. Let's go! Let's go!
I'm digging with my fingertips. I'm gripping at the ground I stand upon. I'm susceptible, fragile bones. I'm never gonna be.
If you have a better opening sequence, then send it over. Well, wouldn't you know it? It's the second Great Fossil Challenge this week. But before we start, the first user who got the right answer last week was TheNakedAtheist. And the other users that got it right are... Now, before I go on to this week's fossil and explaining what we saw last week in our fossil, I have a Star Trek challenge for you guys. And I know it's kind of racist, but it's kind of funny too. So, if Muslims are Klingons and Jews are Ferengis, what are Christians? Okay, but never mind. So, which fossil did we see last week? Well, all of you who got it right know that it was Gigantopithecus, which is the general name of a family of 3 different species, which were the largest apes to ever live. And that, of course, is one of the possible candidates for the Yeti. Though that would hardly explain how the Yeti was sighted in the United States, as the Gigantopithecus mostly lived in what is today's Vietnam, China, and India. Now, speaking of Yetis, another ungrounded belief is held by the Chinese, and that belief cost us in an unknown number of molars belonging to that species. The reason being is that in traditional Chinese medicine, grinded fossiled teeth are supposed to be a medicine of some sort. Scientists, however, view the molars as something a little bit different, and they consider it evidence for something that we call convergent evolution. And convergent evolution is the phenomena that explains how different traits evolve in different unlinked species. A good example for that would be wings. And you know that bats have wings, although they are mammals, and birds have wings, although they are descendants of the dinosaurs. And we even have fish with wings, which is really weird. And the molars represent convergent evolution because it evolved both in the Gigantopithecus and in our own ancestors. Now, another thing to note by that U-shaped bone is that it allows room for a windpipe to pass by, which means that the jaw could have been erected vertically on the spine, which is something that we know today from modern humans. Although this is a minority view because, as you already understood, the Gigantopithecus was gigantic, so standing erect would cause enormous stress on its feet, so it probably moved like modern gorillas on all 4 limbs. And that basically describes Gigantopithecus, and there's a link to the Wikipedia article if you wish to read more. And now to this week's fossil. Dating back 1.6 million years ago, which is really weird because the world has only existed for 5,000 years, as we know from the Bible. Its brain size was around 900 cubic centimeters. Also, it had no chin and predominant brow ridges. And it also has a kind of interesting story altogether. So, let's see this week's fossil!
Yeah, I know evolution's the devil's lie, because blah 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 blah. That's not what the Bible says. Blah 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 blah. That's not what the Bible says. Blah 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 blah. That's not what the Bible says. That's not what the Bible says.
And again, just like last week, the users that will get it right will get that super massive shout out. And again, like always, thank Epicourse420 for the fossil challenge itself, and thank U2B Monkey for the background music. So, I'm waiting for your answers, both on the Star Trek challenge and this week's fossil challenge. I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye!
Yeah, I know evolution's the devil's lie, because blah 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 blah. That's not what the Bible says. Blah 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 blah. That's not what the Bible says. Blah 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 blah. That's not what the Bible says. That's not what the Bible says.